Alexa's got something for Spanish currently. I don't know any Spanish. My best line is "Donde está el baño?" which is the most popular one, I think. Anyways, so today we have our guest today. She is a dual graduate at Northeastern. She has written a cookbook, Champion Mental Health for the Biden Harris Administration, main force behind the Bake It Till You Make It LLC, sort of for anxiety in teens. And I've got to say, a lot of the stuff you've gotten on there, I've seen a bunch of pictures, got my mouth kind of watering a bit. It's very, very good looking food, and I would love to eat some of that food. I'm a big foodie, so you could check out her 4 cookbooks on her Bake It Till You Make It website, which I also, by the way, saw a few t-shirts on there that was a bit questionable for my young eyes. There's a few merchandising there that's sort of like with, I think, a flag outside of
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's
person.
funny.
And I was like, okay, this is different. It's a bit strange, but I think it's different. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you today. We have a few topics for our podcast today. So our topics today are your story. All right, let's start with this one. Alexi, you're up.
Okay, so honestly, a big question I had is what inspired you to kind of do everything you're doing right now, right? You have a lot of stuff going on, you have books published, you know, you just said that you have a documentary going on. What is inspiring you while you're doing all these things?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think truly my own story has inspired me. I've struggled with my mental health for most of my life, but I didn't really know what was going on with me and the struggles that I was facing until I went to college and really started to struggle even more. I think the process of being away from home for the first time, not having the support, that they had for so long, really erupted some of these undiagnosed mental health challenges. And when I was going through my struggle, learning and understanding that I had major depression as well as OCD and struggled with an eating disorder, I didn't recognize, or I guess I didn't recognize, number one, um, how common it was, but number two, also how alone I would feel. And because of that, I really felt like I wanted to kind of use my own story to help others feel less alone and to really normalize the mental health conversation and what it's like to live with mental illness or mental health. So truly, my own story has been the guiding light of my work and knowing what I would have wanted and what I didn't kind of receive before.
That's really amazing. And any person, not, it doesn't have to be your inspiration, but maybe a person you admire kind of in relation, maybe a person you looked up to when, doing all these things.
Yeah, I think I have two answers for that. On the one hand, my therapist, who I've been seeing for over a decade, um, her name is Dina, has been such a huge inspiration for me. I think she truly believed in my story and believed in my abilities to help others. And I think that having that was so supportive, such an amazing part of my own story and
Hmm.
allowed me to feel comfortable sharing. I also really look up to her. I feel like her work in the mental health field is really admirable. But then I also really, in terms of like celebrities, I really looked up to, and I continue to look up to, Mariska Hargitay, who is Olivia Benson on Law and Order SVU. And I've always looked up to her because she uses her platform for good. She started a organization kind of related to her experience playing Olivia Benson on this show. She got a lot of people who reached out to her telling her that they felt seen by her. And I just have always admired her because here she is. She has such a huge platform and she's using it in a way that connects people, that helps people by creating her own organization called the Joyful Heart Foundation. I've just been so inspired by her as well.
Hmm. That sounds great. And Another question I had is that you just said that you were the first person was your therapist.
Yes, yep, exactly.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to ask because there's definitely right this stigma, especially maybe less in America, but especially in other countries, that people don't go to any kind of people who deal with mental health because
Yeah.
there's this stigma about, if you go there, you're crazy and stuff.
Yep.
So maybe a few words about this, maybe of encouragement, maybe, just talking about this.
Yeah, of course. No, I totally understand what you mean. I think we've, at least in the US, have started to make some strides in allowing there to be a little bit less stigma. But for me, I've really observed that as like less stigma around anxiety and depression, and not necessarily focusing on stigma for other diagnoses. But I get it. I mean, when I started therapy, I definitely felt the stigma. I definitely felt nervous to begin. I think I was in a place where I didn't really know what else to do. And for that reason, I felt like this was my kind of only option. I really wasn't functioning at that point. But I definitely understand and know that stigma really didn't allow me to seek help for so long. I guess I also want to say that for anyone who might be struggling with the idea of going to therapy or struggling with stigma at all within their mental health challenges, just to trust yourself. I mean, you know yourself best. And if you find that you're not functioning in a way that you usually do, or you feel like you're struggling, it's more than acceptable and okay and valid to seek help for that. You wouldn't say to someone who was struggling with their physical health or had broken their arm that they shouldn't go to the doctor to get that fixed. And so I wish that there wasn't such a stigma around mental health. Like there is no stigma around physical health, and I feel. So I wish that we could change that. And I think slowly but surely we're starting to chip away. But I think making that comparison can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, Winston, you have anything?
Yeah, first off, I want to say, Lexi, your response to one of after our guest told you something, it was like, "That's great." I feel like that's just like a it's a flat answer with like, "Oh, that's great." It's sort of like you're listening to someone talking about, "I made a desk today," and you'll be like, "That's great." I just
Oh,
thought that was
I
like,
I do think it's great, like when you
yeah,
have
of course,
people
I
you
know what you're
admire.
saying.
So.
It's just that I just picked up on it, and I was like on the side, kind of laughing a bit, but the second thing, you talk about stigma and stuff, and I do notice that with anxiety, and when I tell people I have anxiety, people usually say like, everyone has anxiety, it's not something big, it's not a big deal, you deal with it, you go on with your life, you just try and find like maybe a book to read or something, just go on your own way. So that's how I've seen a lot of people react to me saying I have anxiety, and especially social anxiety. I'm like, people are like, so you don't talk to people, and I'm like, that's not exactly it. I think for me personally, social anxiety comes in the form of like with people I know, I'm not sure that I could meet their expectations. Therefore, I try to avoid them sometimes.
Uh-huh.
You know, and that's the way I am. And I feel like there's definitely a way to make anxiety not as stigmatized. And the same thing with OCD and stuff, which I saw on your site as well. Um, OCD is just thought of as like the perfectionist's sort of disorder.
Uh-huh.
And I really think that actually my grandma, I talked to this on my previous episode about OCD, and my grandmother, she has OCD, and her OCD is that she won't stop cleaning the house no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to meet her expectations a few times, and we just have not met her expectation for cleaning stuff. She will demolish every single bacterial growth in the entire house,
Uh-huh.
and you'll be like, "How did you do that? I can't do that myself." So it's sort of a very very sad thing to see with my grandmother who didn't never got help. But these are just some struggles of life that I've gone through, my family have gone through. What sort of biggest struggle did you go through that was the biggest wall for you, a big hurdle for you that you got through with the right advice or the right help? What sort of help also helped you through this?
Yeah, I think for me, my biggest obstacle, at least so far in my mental health journey, has been really working through my depression. Like you said, with anxiety, I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, everyone has anxiety," which, we can all feel anxious at times, just like we can all feel sad at times. But when it crosses over into a disorder, that isn't something that everyone has, and I wish people understood that a little bit better. But in terms of my struggle, yeah, I think with depression was really was really hard because it wasn't something that anyone could really see, and also it really affected, like, created this lack of motivation for me. And that was really hard. That's really not like who I am, and I'm a very driven person, but with the depression, like, it really took away kind of any motivation or um will to continue my work. But I feel like there's always fake it till you make it, and the work that I do has always been like a guiding light for me, even when the depression was really, really challenging. In addition to therapy and medication, which were incredibly helpful, as well as my own work and advocacy as a way to work through the depression. I also did something called TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. And this is a treatment for depression where it's like a machine that helps create a part of your brain, or strengthen a part of your brain that resists depression. For a lot of people who don't have depression, or their depression isn't like biological in their brain, this might not make sense. But for someone who has altered brain chemistry like I do, or did, this was really helpful for me.
Yeah, and it seems like something very interesting mechanics of it. Do you know exactly how it sort of helped in like other people, or is there any other cases of this with like reports?
Yeah, it's very helpful, and it's interesting because there aren't a lot of people who know about it, but it's actually been FDA approved since 1980, 19, no, not 1985, 1995. Still a very long time, almost 30 years. But it's not as like talked about, and it's just becoming more normalized, I think. And it's really interesting because a lot of people have, or I've learned that for a lot of people who are working through kind of depressive symptoms, sometimes medication can, the side effects can make it worse or make it harder. And with TMS, there really aren't any side effects, and it doesn't work for everyone, but for those who it does work for, it's very powerful, and I can speak to that myself.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of reports of side effects of some medication for, psychological responses and for mental health, and some of them turn out they accept them pretty well actually. With
Uh-huh.
like, they actually work, but there's few people who have very severe symptoms for their mental health and stuff, and it actually makes it much worse. And there's like reports of people dying sometimes, and it kind of feeling even more intense their depression. So it's definitely, I think this is a very great invention. Yeah, it's awesome. Uh, and that kind of goes to my next question actually for actually topic, which is advice. What are some plus sides and downsides of food to mental health and emotional health? Because food is much better than medication, personally.
I think that for me, using food as a mechanism to tell stories has been at the center of my work. The idea that we have been telling stories around food for so long, and whether it's like family stories, cultural stories, food is really ingrained in so much of our world. And so for me, I felt like taking something that's really commonplace, and pairing it with something that is hard to talk about for a lot of people really made sense to me. And that's what I've seen with Bake It Till You Make It. I also think not only is it a great conversation starter, but it's also, sharing recipes and being able to cook or bake with friends and family, having conversations while you're baking or cooking, sometimes standing side by side with someone. It's a little bit easier to talk about difficult things than maybe having an intense conversation looking each other in the eye, I guess. So there's that. I also think that for a lot of people, food and creating food and cooking and baking has been a really helpful and limited, helpful way to work through stress. I think the pandemic was such a good example of that. You know, at the beginning of the pandemic, especially, so many people turned to baking and baking bread, and in particular. And I think that that just speaks to how helpful it can be, not only to create something that has conversation piece, but also to just de-stress, I guess.
Yeah. I know me and Alexi both are. We both love food a lot. I know Alexi, I've talked to you about food a few times, like fish and stuff, and
Hmm.
it's not the same thing as bakeries, but I know you have a lot to talk about this. Food, I think for me personally, when I'm sad, I usually just try and, either I'll just go downstairs, get a snack, something like bread. Maybe I'll get like a few chips. Maybe I'll get some cookies as well. And just sitting in my front porch, looking outside, nature also is a great thing for mental health. Personally, I think because it's very relaxing.
I
Um,
agree.
so I just go outside. I'll like maybe take my diary out there, write my feelings in there, eat a few snacks, and look at nature. Just get inspired by this very beautiful world that I'm too preoccupied thinking of um, my own struggles that I could just be outside relaxing and trying to throw away all these feelings at that moment. And I'm not sure because Alexei, I know in Russia, I think you're taught a bit differently. Maybe I know food is still very important for you. And I want to know like how does food affect you?
Mm, I don't I don't necessarily know how it affects me. I'd say that I mean definitely just I mean I like eating snacks. I like eating in general. I like different food. I'd say that um it's hard. Like I don't have anything specific that would be, kind of unique to my perception of food. I would say that it's pretty similar to yours. And I mean nature too, obviously. I love nature. I think it's a great way to kind of calm down. Um, and yeah, I think for me, food is very similar, right? You know, if I'm stressed, I might eat more. And yeah, I mean, I just don't think I have too much to say about it. I think, my stance on food is pretty general.
Yeah, I think personally it's a very good connector of connections as well for like that was a doozy kind of sentence, a connector of connections. Um, anyways, I feel like when you eat food with a bunch of people, you have like a good thing to connect over with a bunch of people, and you could just talk to them about everything going on in your day. Um, because there's a few times where like you have this very intense thing you want to talk about, and there's nothing on the table, you're not eating anything, and you're just staring at the person right in their soul while they're trying to like not get uncomfortable with what you're saying. And I think food is a much it's a good diffuser. I think so. That's my personal thoughts on food personally. The next thing I wanted to ask is like this was a bizarre fact actually I found that 433,000 people each year in the U.S. have endured some form of sexual assault, which is just well, first of all it's disgusting and mind-boggling. What is the most important thing you have to say for these people?
Yeah, that's really challenging number to hear. Unfortunately, it is so common, and I think I think a lot of people don't come forward always, so it's probably like even more than that, because it's an underreported number. So this is definitely something that we need to work through, as a society, and also feel, for those who feel comfortable sharing their stories, just like with mental health, I think the more people who share their experiences, the less alone other people feel, which I think is really important. But of course, if you've experienced this, you don't owe anyone that. But if you feel like you want to come forward, I think that can be so helpful, or at least, in my experience, it has been for me. I think in both capacities, sharing my story has been so um, helpful, not only because I've been able to own it on my own, but also know that I'm affecting and supporting others too.
So tell me about how you were able to get through that sort of experience, because I know it's a very jarring thing to go through, and it must be very. It's a big thing to struggle with first of all, and you don't know who to tell because it's first of all this person who's like now sort of you're trying to avoid at all cost is lurking somewhere, and it's first of all very scary, I imagine, and second of all, it's kind of also very scary to tell other people in fear that this other person might come back for you, I think.
Yeah,
So how are you able to get through this?
right. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, having the support of a therapist and of my community was so helpful and healing. And I know that isn't necessarily something that everyone has, but at least my personal experience, that was a big part of my healing process. I also believe that so much of my healing came from being able to share my story. For me, this was something that I wanted to do. And every time I shared it, made me feel like a little bit more of a survivor rather than a victim and helped me reclaim it. I don't think this is something that you ever necessarily really maybe get through to say, or at least in my experience, I feel like I'm still working through a lot of these feelings. And the experience is, as you said, the feeling of not feeling safe all the time, that really takes a toll. But what has helped me so far is having that support, and also being able to share my story in a way that is meaningful to me. And I know a lot of people have found that too.
Yeah, and you say that sharing experiences has helped you kind of get through this. What is the major experience that you think you found you were helping someone and they came up to you and they're like, you just changed my life? What was that moment like for you when you realized, oh, I'm actually doing this for people really well, and I'm actually helping people? Um,
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is all I could want. That's truly, I feel like my purpose in this life is to help others feel seen and heard. So anytime I get that kind of feedback, it's always so incredibly powerful and helpful to know that like what I am doing does make a difference. Sometimes it's hard to take in, honestly, because it's hard to believe that, yeah, people do connect to me, not because I don't believe that my story is universal or can't be connected to, but more just because when it's you, it doesn't feel so big, maybe, or so like amazing. But to others, I know it really has been a source of inspiration, and I'm so proud of that. And that experience for me, when I hear that, it's very surreal, and it's something that I'm still kind of working through and understanding how to respond to comments like that.
Yeah, and I think personally, when I'm going like to my podcast, to my YouTube channel, to like LinkedIn to see everything that's going on with my posts and what I'm doing currently, I find it so it's very impressive to me that so many people are willing to listen to me, a 17-year-old, talk about mental health and stuff. Even though currently I only have 60 listeners on Spotify, that's still enough for me to feel like, wow, I'm reaching people. And the
Uh-huh.
major thing was like, I saw on my analytics that I reach people in Italy, in Sweden, and I'm like, wow, I'm going very far, and these people actually listening to this, and I feel like I'm making an actual impact. And impact is something I really want to be able to do. I really want to be able to help people out who don't realize that there is help out there,
Mhm.
because that is the thing that can make me the happiest. I feel like um,
Yeah.
being able to help someone who is very unfortunate and is able to now go through life, knowing that he is not alone or she is not alone in this big world. So yeah, it's just a very powerful thing, like you said. Um, and I'm not sure if Alexi has anything else to say.
No, but I do really feel that, especially reaching into other countries, I think is a very big thing because when you're kind of local, it feels smaller than if you kind of reach people that live absolutely different lives with, different cultures. And for them, this might be even more relevant because, again, we were kind of talking about the stigma in the US, for example.
Yep.
But maybe for people in other countries, maybe Sweden it was, Winston? or
Yeah, it was
um,
Sweden and Italy.
in
Italy.
Italy, maybe in Italy, the stigma is even bigger, and for them to hear this, maybe it's going to be even more important. So I think that's a big thing, definitely.
Gotcha.
So tell me about like your experience going to the president's White House for the mental health thing you did.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That was absolutely an incredible experience. I had the opportunity to go to the White House in 2022 with 29 other mental health advocates, and it was such an incredible experience, not only being able to, of course, go to the White House, but also to be among so many other people who are doing this work and who care about mental health. Sometimes it can feel like I'm doing this in a silo, or it's hard to feel connected to others who are working in the same lens or in space. But to me, that experience helped me realize that there are so many people doing such incredible work and inspired me to support others as well. And it also helped me take my own experience and work more seriously, having that kind of um, I guess validation and having that opportunity to know that I was there for a reason, and that was a huge confidence boost for me too.
Yeah, and confidence. Personally, confidence is something I lack. I have low self esteem as well as social anxiety. Not the best mix, I think.
Yeah.
And with low confidence, when I go to school, I'm very different than on the podcast currently. People on this podcast will listen to this and be like, this teen is very very active. He's incredible with his voice and stuff. While in high school currently, I'm just like the most quiet person you ever meet. I
Hmm.
will be in the corner of like a classroom, just like looking at my worksheet, like looking down constantly, and I'm avoiding eye contact at all costs usually, which is something that I really struggle with currently. How have you dealt with anxiety?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Anxiety does really take a toll on confidence as well. And this is something that I'm still working through. I think that um, anxiety of any kind, whether it's social anxiety or my anxiety disorder, kind of has connections to OCD, which I know you had said that you knew a bit about as well. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that it's an ongoing battle, at least it is for me, and being able to use different tools that I've learned through therapy has been really helpful, like tools that allow me to separate myself from the anxiety and kind of take a step back and help me recognize that the facts of the situation, because anxiety, I think, at least for me, I oftentimes make up stories in my head. So having the opportunity to go back to the facts of the situation can be helpful. It's been one of the most helpful skills.
Yeah, and you talk about making up stories in your head usually, and for me, when I'm in social situations with some of my friends, I feel like I'm not impressive enough, so I'll just try and make up a random story of like something funny or something like incredible I did, and unfortunately, that has led to in the past me losing a few friends because they realized I was not being truthful with them,
Uh-huh.
and I feel like, well, I should actually, after starting the podcast, I actually felt like I could talk more about me personally as who I personally am, right? And from then on, actually, I've been nothing but truthful with my friends, and I realized they're much more happier with that. They're
Yeah.
much more accepting of me as a person, rather than me as like an incredible god of a person. You don't have to be perfect. You could just be yourself. That's the main message that I always remind myself, and I encourage other people to follow. So that's just something that I realized in high school, which I think many people in like my therapist from high school, my doctor thought very insightful, and I took that as a compliment. I think, and that was very great. Um, Ending segment. How are you now?
Oh, just want to say, yeah, that really resonates with me too. Because I definitely feel like a lot of times I need to be like so impressive in order to have like yeah, to lower my anxiety or have like value in the world. So I really do understand that.
Yeah.
How am I now? I'm doing well. I mean, I still certainly struggle, and I think that's a really important part of the work that I do and the brand that I've created is not saying that like don't struggle anymore, because that wouldn't be truthful. And yeah, and so I just want to be honest about that I do still struggle, but I am in a place where I have the right resources and support, to allow me to at least work through that and be an advocate and share my story really authentically, I think, and that's all I could have wanted.
That's awesome. And what are you currently working on currently?
Yeah, I think that so I shared a little bit about the documentary. So that was a project that actually came out of the White House experience, meeting a producer who wanted to share my story in film, which was amazing. We spent the last year working on that, and now are just being able to screen it. It's also in the film festival circuit, which is really awesome and something I'm super proud of. So working on just getting that out there. And then I'm also working on another book of short stories, but that are unique to me. Versus the other kind of books that I've written that are more anthologies of other people's stories.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about the documentary currently?
Yeah, so the documentary, it's a feature-length documentary. So it's full movie. It tells the story of the creation of Bake It Till You Make It, as well as my recovery kind of arc and story, and interviews different people in my life who have seen Bake It Till You Make It grow or who are involved in the organization. And yeah, I mean, it's been so wonderful. We've premiered it in some big cities like Boston, where I'm from, New York, and LA just a couple of weeks ago. And the response has been wonderful. I think people really feel connected to the story. And, that's all I could want, really, are people to see themselves in this and knowing that it's inspiring other people to get help.
Yeah, and I just want to say that when I searched up "Bake It Till You Make It," at first I was like, "Wow, this is a TV show," and I was like, "No, that's run by
Oh,
Duff
yeah, yeah, the
Goldman."
Food Network.
And I'm like, okay, well, it's still impressive. I feel like I see your food, and I'm like, you could give Julia Child a run for her money. I think.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that your food looks great. Final message, or as I like to call it, the painkiller. All right. So the final message or painkiller is a breakdown summary of your main advice or final things you would like to say. You could plug in anything you'd like, any future things that you want to have, your socials and anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my final advice would just be, I completely understand the really pervasive stigma that surrounds mental health and how difficult it can be to ask for help. But if you're in a place where you think you might need it, just really reinforce and support the idea that it's okay to ask for that. It's very brave to ask for that. And there are so many wonderful resources, whether those are in the community, or, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 988. There are lots of people and resources that want to support you if you're struggling, and you are deserving of all of them. So I just want to say that. In terms of wanting to learn a little bit more about my work, my website is bakeittillyoumakeit.co, not .com.co, and Till has two L's. Also on social media, I'm Bake It Till You Make It LLC, really across all platforms, as well as my own social media. I definitely share a lot of my work with Bake It Till You Make It, and how I'm doing and working through these different issues. And that is just my name, which is Dayna Altman, and Dayna is with a Y.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. You have been great. Remember to check out Dana's website as well as the Interact Club website and our YouTube for more channels and more videos like this. Thank you guys. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you.